Warning, this content is for entertainment and educational purposes only. Alright, Gym Bros, Big Paul here today, and we're going to talk about how to build a proper bulking diet. I promise this is the follow-up to the video I made the other day about is bulking and cutting dead. You can still bulk. I've always done off seasons where we push the calories up, but we do it intelligently. And I'm going to talk to you about how I construct my off-season diets, bulking diets, whatever the fuck you want to call them, so you don't get fat and you put on muscle. We want to keep ourselves as lean as possible in the off-season, not look like a big fat pig and have to diet down like crazy for contest prep. We talked about it in the last video. If you missed that video, you can go back and look at it. It's bulking and cutting dead. I think it's the name of it. Something like that, but it was a video I put up last week. You can go back and take a look at that if you want to check it out. And this is sort of the follow-up to that, where I'm going to dig into how I put my diets together, and it'll all make sense at the end. We'll go through everything in detail, but the ultimate goal is to grow muscle, get bigger, not get fat, so you don't have to go through a contest prep and murder yourself losing 30, 40, 50 pounds of fat, which sucks. Anybody that's done that before knows what I'm talking about. I've done it. It is terrible having to drop that much body fat. It is absolutely miserable to come down that much in on a contest prep from an off-season bulk, a stupid bulk, a dirty bulk, a gym bro bulk, whatever you want to call it. But anyway, before we get into that, I want to remind you about the PED cheat sheet that I put together. It's the How to Build Effective Cycles cheat sheet. I have it up on my website for sale for $30. It's super cheap. It's 30 pages long. For those of you that don't want to pick up the Anabolics e-course, it's too expensive for you. The cheat sheet is kind of a summary of everything that's in there. It's the shortcut, the reference guide, the cliff notes. If you want the paint by numbers, how to build a cycle, it's like 30, 32, 33 pages long, something like that. And I go through how to build cycles and have a brief summary profile of each major compound that we use in off-season cycles. It makes it super simple, at least my methodology on how I build cycles and what I use to win my pro card with. And you can go through and look at that. Super cheap, $30. Pick it up. If you want to support the channel, support me. In the video description below, there is a link to it if you want to go check it out. Anyway, enough of that. Let's dig into how to build a bulking diet in just 1 second. All right, as I mentioned in the intro, our goal with an off-season diet when we're trying to put on size is to maximize the amount of clean food we are eating without getting fat. I didn't really talk about this in the bulking and cutting is dead video, but if you think about it logically, if you have increased your food, your clean whole foods, and you have gained weight, and you haven't added a significant amount of body fat, there is only one possible outcome, and that's that you have added lean tissue. Possibly some water weight, that's another part of the equation too. If you're continuing to get just fatter and fatter and fatter, that's not good either. Now, you can look at it by the numbers. If you've added 30, 40, 50 pounds in an off season, most of the time, I had that crazy rebound where I didn't get fat. I would say there's a high probability that you just put on a bunch of fat. Now, that's not always the case, and that's why the scale isn't always the answer. We have to marry the scale as a measurement tool with the progress pics. When I'm monitoring my clients, my coaching clients, what I do, I look at the pictures each week on a check-in. I will look back at the beginning of the phase, the pictures from then to where I'm at right now, and from week to week, how we are progressing. If I see a significant decline in body composition, I know we have pushed things too far. We need to pull back, make a correction. If I see that somebody is continuing to gain weight and they haven't gotten fatter, body composition has maintained for the most part, I will continue to push the calories up. My goal in the off season is to maximize the amount of clean, whole foods that we eat without getting fat. As I mentioned, if you are eating more food, if you have gained weight, and you have not seen a serious decline in body composition in the check-in pictures, you have gotten bigger and put on more muscle. That's really the only possible outcome. Another benefit of pushing the calories up intelligently in the off season is increased metabolism. So when you go to cut, you don't have to pull the calories down so low to get the fat off. That is another benefit of pushing calories up. Now, I don't do big aggressive bumps with calories, except maybe coming out of contest prep when you're super depleted and need to fill back out. What I'll do in the off season, I make small adjustments. And for me, the carbohydrates are the wild card. Protein stays static year round. I really don't mess with protein a whole bunch. Maybe throughout the week we'll pull it up and down a little bit. If we're carb cycling, we may pull the protein down on the high carbohydrate days, because carbohydrates are protein sparing, and we just want to maximize the ability to digest our food. If you're eating 1,000 grams of carbs on your high carbohydrate days, it's really going to be hard to hammer down 350 grams of protein and not be bloated and distended. That's another key point too. We want in our off season when we're pushing food up, we want to eat easy to digest foods. I see a lot of guys sometimes that'll be eating things like brown rice and a bunch of vegetables in the off season. They're eating oats, and they tell me that they can't gain weight and they can't eat anymore. And it's because you're using very dense, fibrous foods. I'm not saying this is the best for your health. Remember, we are bodybuilders. We're not trying to live and to be 100 years old, at least not in this phase. When we're pushing food up, we want to eat easy to digest things. In fact, I really don't eat vegetables in the off season. I know that's horrible. I know a lot of guys that don't do it. I will supplement in with a fiber supplement at the end of the day, something like Metamucil to help with my digestion and my health. But I really don't eat a lot of vegetables. I'll get my micronutrients from vitamins. I do eat some fruits, but I find if I eat a ton of vegetables, I can't eat enough food to put on any muscle. I just can't. So I do think carb cycling for bodybuilding purposes is probably the best type of way to eat in an off season or just in general. And you'll see that most top bodybuilders do some sort of caloric cycling. They may not call it carb cycling by name, but you'll see where they are adjusting food up and down based on whether or not they're working out. Sometimes it's super simple. It's just I eat less food on the days that you don't work out and more food on the days that you do work out. Typically, the wild card is going to be your carbohydrates. As I mentioned before, protein stays static, fats stay static as well. But the advantages of carb cycling is that it's sort of self-regulating. We are going to adjust our carbohydrates up and down based on energy demand. And then once or twice a week, we're going to push them super high on a high day where we're going to try to super compensate and get extra glycogen storage. Now, I know the science nerds out there. I love science myself. I was a science major in college. I didn't study physiology or biology. It was computer science, but I studied physics and math and statistics and computer science. It's at the end of the day, I do love science. I'm a science guy, but there's some things that there just aren't studies on. And 250-pound bodybuilders that are taking PEDs and insulin and GH and stuffing down 1,000 grams of carbohydrates, there just are not a lot of studies on. Now, what I have found with carb cycling, if it's married with PEDs, if it's married with the proper type of training, you're going to need to do a little bit of volume with it. I'm not saying you have to go crazy with the volume. And you are stuffing a bunch of carbs down, keeping the fats low, taking insulin, taking GH. There is an ability to increase glycogen synthesis and not get fat. I've seen it over and over and over and over again. I've seen it with my own. I was eating 2,000 grams of carbs on my high days on contest prep. I got up to eating 2,000 grams of carbs on my high day. And my body fat continued to get lower and lower and lower and lower each week. There's no study that's going to explain that. Now, we have theories. We have ideas. Milo Sarchev talks about his hyperemia. I think that's what he calls it, system. I apologize if I'm slaughtering the name of that. But essentially, you can force additional glycogen synthesis and end up with full round muscles. Now, if you look at traditional studies, like something like 2 to 3% or maybe up to 5% of actual muscle mass is stored glycogen. We can do the math on it. That does not seem to be the case with a big 250, 300-pound bodybuilder. We can see 10, even, let's just say it is 5%. If you're Samson Dauda and you have 200 pounds of muscle mass and you can add another 5% through forcing glycogen synthesis, that's another 10 pounds of fullness in the muscle. Now, 10 pounds is going to make a huge difference in how you look on the stage. Why wouldn't you want that? And I have seen it be even more than that. I flatten out like crazy. I can put on 10, 15 pounds if I'm forcing up my carbs and taking insulin and doing things like that. Now, on those days, with the trick of the energy management system, you can be in a caloric surplus if you're glycogen depleted. This is a big if. This is what makes carb cycling work. You have to pull the carbs down low on some days to allow insulin sensitivity to reset, to kind of deplete a bit. And then you have the high days that are followed up where you're using insulin, keeping the fats super low, pushing the carbs as high as you can tolerate, or I shouldn't say tolerate, but as high as your body can handle without spilling over and looking like shit. I find the upper limit for most people, just depends on how big you are, is somewhere around 1,000 grams of carbs. There's some people that can push higher. I'm a person that can push higher, but very few people. Somewhere between 1,000 and 1,200 once you're over 200 pounds. If you're under 200 pounds, it's going to be less, 600, 800. It really just depends on how big you are. And I sort of have to figure that out based on just playing around with the person. The bigger the guy, usually the more glycogen they can synthesize and the more we can push it. And what I found is as you get more aggressive with these high days, as you progress, you can actually force more glycogen synthesis, it seems like, and more fullness. Now, if we think about this logically, and I think this is a mistake that where a lot of amateur bodybuilders make, is they eat too many fats and not enough carbohydrates. They have this irrational fear of carbohydrates. And if we think about this logically, carbs are, glucose is the preferred fuel source for the body. In fact, your muscles have, as we established, have a large capacity to store glycogen for fuel, glucose for fuel, for later use for the muscles. It is the preferred fuel source. You can put it to test. You can not eat carbs for a few days, 3 or 4 days, go lift weights. You'll see your numbers drop in the gym. I hear guys all the time say that they don't. They're full of shit. And you go back in, you load up on carbs, you do a high carbohydrate day, take some insulin. I'm not suggesting that you take some insulin, but if I took some insulin after not eating carbs for a few days, you get insane pumps. Your look changes completely. I've posted pictures of me after high carbohydrate days, it's an insane change. So it's undeniable. And with that trick in the energy management system, your body is going to burn glucose first as fuel, store it as glycogen second, and if glycogen is spilled over at that point, then there's de novo lipogenesis, where it could be your body's going to turn the carbohydrates into lipids, and then they could get stored as fat. Whereas fats, any excess fats that you eat, are just going to get stored as body fat. They're already prepackaged, ready to go to be stored as body fat. As in regards to fats in diets, like, guys have this misconception that they need them for hormone production. Steroidal hormones in the human body are made from cholesterol, and I have yet to see anybody that's deficient in cholesterol on their blood panels. Your body makes plenty of its own cholesterol. You don't have to worry about that. Not to mention that 95% of us, at least the people that are listening to this channel, are probably enhanced, and you're getting all your hormones from a 3cc needle. You don't need any additional fats for that. And saturated fats at the end of the day are essentially just fuel anyway. We're also going to have additional lipid skewing being on PEDs, and if you want to play it safe with your cardiovascular health, you probably want to keep those saturated fats to a minimum to keep your lipids in line. I know there's always debate about, the relationship between cholesterol and cardiovascular disease. I don't care what guys say. Not everyone that has high cholesterol ends up with a cardiovascular event, but pretty much everybody that has a cardiovascular event has high cholesterol, or at least a blockage or any sort of plaque buildup. So there is a well-established correlation, whether you like it or not. I would think you would want to play that safe if you're taking PEDs, so eating a diet high in saturated fats and carbohydrates at the same time. You could probably get away with it if you're doing a keto or a carnivore style of diet. But it's when you have that combination of fats and carbohydrates, it seems to be, especially saturated fats and sugars, simple sugars, seem to be the combo that kills. So with fats as well, we want to supplement in some EFAs. Your body definitely needs EFAs. They're called essential fatty acids for a reason. Your body doesn't make them. We need LA and ALA. Your body can make EPA, DHA, AA sort of, but you should supplement those in as well. Fish oil, flax oil. You want to balance the omega-6 to omega-3 ratio in your diet. Really, it should be closer to 1-to-1. That's probably what we ate in nature. And most people with the average American diet are north of 10-to-1. 4-to-1 probably would be the minimum we'd want to be at, but closer to 1-to-1 ratio of omega-3 to omega-6. For your essential fatty acids, you probably want to eat some fatty fish or take fish oil pills. If you wanted to eat fish, I would say eat a piece of salmon, wild-caught salmon, once per day, or just take some fish oil pills. That's what I do. I don't particularly. I'm not a real big fan of salmon myself. Flax, walnuts, other good sources. Most people overeat omega-6, so we want to be careful. And saturated fat, so we want to be careful with that. And as far as our protein sources go, keep it simple. Really just keep it simple. Keep your protein sources as low in fat as you possibly can. Because most, outside of the fatty fish, most of your protein sources, your animal-based protein sources, are going to be high in saturated fat, and we want to keep those low. So egg whites, we've got lean ground beef you can do. You can do chicken, cod. If you wanted to eat that fatty fish, you could eat some salmon here and there. Those are some other options that you have. And as far as protein consumption, I would say most people vastly overeat protein. Now, it's probably not going to hurt you if you want to eat more protein, but at the end of the day, what's likely happening is you're just eating really expensive carbohydrates. Your body's just going to convert with that excess protein through gluconeogenesis into carbohydrates, and not very efficiently, or you just end up shitting and pissing it out. Protein's almost a free pass. I'm not saying that you can't. At the end of the day, it is a caloric surplus that it causes weight gain, but it's, if you look at the metabolic processes, that how protein's got to be broken down before it actually would, it would have to go through multiple steps before it would actually be stored as body fat. It would have to be, if I recall correctly, it would have to go through gluconeogenesis and then liponeogenesis if your glucose levels are too high, and then it could be stored as fat. I mean, it's likely not going to happen. That's why people eat protein only diets and lose body fat. It's just kind of a stupid way of losing body fat. But as far as protein, how much protein we need, studies show that around 0.75 to 0.8 grams, I don't recall exactly what it is probably sufficient for what we need. I mean, if you look at the amount of muscle protein synthesis that we're generating throughout a day, it's just really, to gain a pound of muscle a month, it's just grams per day. It's a very small amount. But, there is protein turnover. There's, the amino acid pool in the body. There's other things going on. So I'm oversimplifying. But we probably overeat protein. And I think that's why a lot of guys end up with big distended bellies, is from overeating protein and impacting their digestion. They have all this stuff sitting in their gut. They ended up with these distended guts. So I keep the protein, me personally, somewhere between 1 gram to 1.25 grams per pound of body weight is plenty for muscle growth. You don't really need much more than that. I've grown just fine on that. The old school bodybuilders used to run 2 grams per pound. I mean, if you wanted to do that, by all means, go for it. I personally am not eating 12 ounces of meat per meal. I have a shitty appetite to begin with. My digestion sucks. There's no way I can eat the amount of carbohydrates that I need to eat. You can hear me right now. I'm burping from fucking acid reflux. There's no way I could just eat what I need to eat and eat that much protein. And you just don't need it. Plus, it's expensive. It's super expensive. As far as your carb sources go, just keep them simple. Easy to digest: white rice, jasmine rice, potatoes. You can throw some oats in here and there, quinoa. But for the most part, rice is easy to digest, easy to get down. On my high carbohydrate days, I'll throw in some simple sugars here and there. People freak out when they see me eating gummy bears and drinking juice and using jam and things like that. But yet, I get ripped. So clearly it's not sugar that makes you fat. I'm not suggesting that that's the way you should eat all the time. But, it's 1 or 2 days a week, and it's a way to get the extra carbohydrates down. Predominantly, your diet really, at the end of the day, if you wanted to just oversimplify it, eat as much chicken and rice as you possibly can, and you're not going to get fat. I've never seen anybody, if they keep the fats low and they eat meat and rice, it's pretty much damn near impossible to get fat. You'd have to really work hard at it to get fat eating meat and rice. Really. It's damn hard work. We want to minimize the fat gain in the off season. You are going to gain a little bit. That just comes with the territory. But ideally, as I mentioned in the bulking and cutting video, if you can't see the outline of your abs, you have gone way too far. You need to pull back and get some fat off. Ideally, I would say for the most people, you're going to be somewhere in that 10 to 15% body fat range. Some people stay leaner. I know some people that don't get over 10% body fat ever. I'm not one of those, but you got to find where your happy spot is. You'll know your body just settles in an area where it's easy to grow. For me, it's somewhere in that 10 to 12% body fat range. It used to be higher when I was smaller. As you get bigger, you'll notice that you also get leaner, and you can maintain being leaner easier. But it's somewhere in that range for me. And I would say most people, if you're above 15% body fat, you have no business doing a bulk diet and trying to gain weight. You're just going to get fatter and fatter, and you're going to make things even harder and harder as you try to diet down. So I would say get lean first. Stage lean is at 6 to 7% body fat range. Off season is 10 to 15% body fat. No more than 15, I would say. You can't see your abs, you're too fat. But if you operate with these simple principles in an off-season diet, you use carbs as your wild card. As you need to drop weight, you just lower the carbs. As you want to push up, you push the carbs up. Keep the saturated fats as low as possible. Supplement in essential fatty acids. Keep your protein sources as lean as possible. Make sure your foods are easy to digest. Don't use stuff that's going to irritate your gut. As you progress in an off-season, you're going to hate yourself. If you're eating things that are going to tear your stomach up, stick to a low FODMAP diet. That's usually what I suggest. Is a low FODMAP diet. You can look it up if you want to. I have videos about low FODMAP diets. And if you do those things, you're going to get a better result in your off-season. You're going to keep your waist nice and tight. You're not going to have gut distension. You're going to stay fairly lean in your off-season, and you're going to add muscle doing it that way. And don't get hyper-focused on the scale. Don't worry about the scale. Worry about what the pictures look like. All right, folks, those are my tips on how to bulk, how to do a bulk diet correctly and not get fat. If you need help with your diet, let me know. I do consultation calls. I do coaching. If you need help with your diet, I can help you out. And I appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you for all your support. Take care. For coaching or consultations, head over to www.anabolicbodybuilding.com to book your spot today. I can help you with optimizing hormones, fat loss, muscle gain, physique, athletic performance, nutrition, and health. For more information, shoot me an email at bigp3rd@gmail.com.